Anand, it's a privilege for me to be talking to you. For the benefit of people who don't know Anand, Anand started his career long back. He did his first startup in '83. He was one of the first Indian entrepreneurs to have a tech startup. So, privilege for me to have you. I mean, I'm old, but he's slightly old.
I'm older.
So Anand, you have, seen many cycles, okay, and you really know that, ideas are good, but ideas executed well is even better, right? So, in your experience, in your journey, how do you take things from idea to execution? And as a founder or as a company, what are the key things that you look for? Do you have any kind of framework slash models in mind when you look at these things?
Sure. So what I found was that it's good to start having a framework. And a long time back, there was a gentleman called Jeffrey Moore, who was actually a faculty member, who in early 90s introduced the concept of crossing the chasm. And the basic point was a lot of startups start up with a lot of flair, and then they sputter to unglorified halt. And just because they're not able to cross from the early customers to really building a business. And I thought more about this and said there has to be a different way of looking at it in the context of deep tech startups. And again, from my own experience, like I said, Banyan was my first company, and I was lucky that it was very successful and became an IPO. But I've also had my set of failures. And so what is it that worked? And so I came up with a sort of an different approach, which I'm using also in the investment that I'm doing in early stage startups. And this was the whole concept of product market fit. And there are really 4 distinct stages of product market fit. And it's very important for the entrepreneurs, especially deep tech entrepreneurs, to understand this, because you think we are very happy with the first set of customers, but if you don't get the next set, which may be very different and maybe a different solution, then it is going to be a hard fall. So the way I look at it is 4 stages of product market fit. So the first one is acceptance, where you have your basic product and you have your first 2 to 5 customers, and at least a couple of them are paying for it. And one useful technique that I found always is to use an analogy. So you should be able to describe your elevator pitch using an analogy. And I find that very useful. So when I did my first company, Banyan Systems, which is a networking company, I said, just like there's a telephone on everyone's desk, there's going to be a PC on everyone's desk. Just like a telephone is connected to a PBX, we are the information PBX. Immediately people understood it. And it's not a very simple idea. And when I did my third startup, which was Responses, we basically said there's a $160 billion direct marketing business in the offline world. This was in early in 1989, and well, actually in 1999, 2000s, when the .com business was starting off and e-commerce was starting off. And we said every e-commerce company is going to require direct marketing, and we are the direct marketing for e-commerce companies. And today, in fact, interestingly, I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was pitching me a business idea. And I said, oh, he was talking about online technology for dry cleaning. I said, oh, you're the OYO for dry cleaning. And he said, yeah, that's exactly what it is. So I encourage everyone to look at it from an analogy. So once you have the basic acceptance phase, and we basically right now as an angel investor, we invest only the acceptance phase, where we say you've got to have a few customers, you got to have paying customers, and you have to have a name pipeline for your next year, because that shows that you've gone to the trouble. Now things have changed, and I raised money, I raised it on PowerPoint. That doesn't work anymore. The next phase is more the adoption phase, where your first set of customers, and this is where crossing the chasm comes in. Your first set of customers, now you're brought into a broader set of customers, 10 to 15, and you have the basic elements of a pipeline which is at least around about 7 to 10x your revenues. And all these are hard metrics, and it's very important to have hard metrics when you have these phases, because for a deep tech startup, you're spending so much on the deep tech, don't forget about the fact that you have to get to your customers. In fact, there's a very famous old analogy. Whenever I go pitch to VCs, There's a long time back, there was a consumer products company building the dog food, which everyone liked. And they said, okay, they did a whole bunch of research, talked to customers, and said, here's the ideal model, here's the ideal flavoring. And they launched a product. It was utter failure. So someone came and asked, did the dogs like the dog food? So I always ask everyone, every time in a company, do the dogs like the dog food? And it's important to understand that you have to have customers. You might be selling to a CIO, but if the person who is the salesperson or the customer segment doesn't like your product, it doesn't matter. The third phase of it is more deployment, where you get a broader deployment of of your product. And now analysts are talking about you. And it's very important. By the third phase, you're going to have some analysts recognizing you. You should be in the Gartner matrix, even if you pay them. Some of these are interesting, important marketing, and that's where you spend your marketing. And then the fourth phase, I call it as influence, where you are really one of the top leaders. And this is when you start getting the acquisition interest. And my own company, when I did responses, we were into the fourth phase, influence. Every major e-commerce company was using us for online marketing. We went public at a unicorn valuation, and then Oracle came and bought us. So that is where you're at the influence stage of it. So I always encourage companies to look at it from all four.
No, fantastic, and I think it's a very elegant and a very simple framework for us to think about, and great examples of how do you look at each stage. So thank you very much. I think today, one of the key topics is, funding, right? And it's funding is a key topic at all points in time. We have seen, the funding winter, the funding summer, the funding bloom, various stages. So how do you think that, startups should look at funding from an efficiency perspective? Do you mean that if it's plentifully available, you spend it as is, or you always look at it from an efficiency perspective? And if you were, running a startup at various stages, how would you look at that?
Right. Well, that's a good question. And now the worst thing can happen, in fact, it's happened to me, where when funding is very liberal, you raise a lot of money. And this is where you have to have a different opinion from the investors. The investors' goal is for you to spend the money as fast as possible because they want you to grow. But you should be judicious. So I personally think that the best way to look at it is, again, these four levels of product market fit. At the first level, you're really raising your seed money. Before that, it's family and friends. And as a seed investor, they want to make sure that there are customers who want to buy the product. Nowadays, what happens is by the time you get to Series A, you need to be well into the second phase, adoption. That means that people are adopting a product. You're not a push sell. I always say you can never push against a string. So it has to be pull from customers. A lot of it is word of mouth. And that is when you can raise a Series A. Efficiency of funding at that point is that being very careful how you spend it. First phase, you're always spending all in product. And the founding team is the company that is establishing the product market fit. By the time you get to the second phase, you got to be important that what you need to do is you need to get to a broader set of customers out there. And my thing is don't raise Series A early. In fact, try to do a couple of seeds before because you don't want to be not second stage when you raise your Series A. Because the moment you raise your Series A, the clock starts. With seed investors, the clock doesn't start. They're patient, they'll stay with you for some time. Venture investors have a very simple rule. They'll invest in 10 companies, they expect one to pay the entire fund, 2 to do well, and the rest 7 they'll dump very fast. So you've got to be very careful when you raise the second round, the second stage. And I would encourage everyone to be lean about it. The third stage automatically happens where you will get inbound requests. You'll get a lot of funding. And fourth is also again automatic. So my basic lesson in terms of lean startups is be very focused on the first two stages. And it's very important for you to have the Series A goal that you have 10 to 15 customers, you have to 7 to 10x of your pipeline, revenue pipeline, and you have a presence with the analysts because that has a very big advantage for DeepTech. And by the way, I have companies where I invested where they actually created a new category working with the analysts. And by the way, analysts love to think, the best thing you do with an analyst is give it and it's their idea and they propagate it. And so, and especially in the context of, I'll give you a simple example, in the case of generative AI, I have invested in a company. They were doing something in security and everything else. Interestingly enough, they did a clean pivot in generative AI, where they said the big problem right now for companies is facting that they're losing data, leaking data because they're using a generative AI model. So they said their whole value is data protection in the context of generative AI. Analysts picked up on that category and said, oh, here is a new category. And so create a category when you're in deep tech. And you got to figure out, and by the way, you should be writing your own blogs and everything else. These are all better ways of, if you just take money, you're going to hire people. Be a little more clever about how you do it so that you're more lean and capital efficient in terms of that. Once you pass the third stage, you'll actually have capital coming in. But it's very important to get to the second stage where a Series A, Series investing takes a look at you.
Thank you. So you're saying that at various stages you need to look at capital differently.
Differently, right.
Initially look at patient capital.
Yes.
Because once the clock starts with a VCPE, then it's like you've got a five-year kind of a time horizon. You may get more money, but you may have to deploy it faster. So be ready to fly before you take that
right.
big check. So that's the way I kind of understand it.
Yeah.
So excellent. So I mean, as you know, human capital is probably one of the key things in startups. And when startups start up, it's usually a one-man or a two-man kind of a story. As they scale human capital, as they bring in new skills or new adjectives to the table, so to speak, what should the founders look for? Meaning, how do they scale it? At what stage do they add more capacity?
Sure. So first thing is you got to take an introspective look at yourself. I tell every founding team, look at yourself, see who's what. I mean, every founding team sometimes will have dead weight. The person's a founder because he just happens to be there and he manages the office. Well, that really is not your founder. Same time, you do have founders, the technical founder. Usually you have to have at least the technology founder. You got to have the product founder. You may not have a sales founder, but you quite often need an operational founder. So what I always say, my cardinal rule is, don't hire too early. At the same time, don't forget to hire your gaps. So if as a founder, and the biggest gap I always found in terms of a lot of founding teams is the true product marketer, the person who really goes and talks to a lot of customers and says, what is the product? Now in my case, I happen to be that, so I never was a gap, but I always wanted to make sure that I had a technology founder who was really good, who sort of focused on that. And usually that was a team. We did have a marketing founder also in the case of responses, who was pretty good, but he did sort of more the mechanical product marketing stuff. It was very important as a founder to have the technology, the operations, and the product marketer. So don't hire a salesperson. Now there are where people talked about you need a sales guy for every stage. I think in the first stage, you are the salesperson. By the way, every technical founder, you cannot say I'm an engineer. You got to say I'm the salesperson. You got to go there. Customers love talking to the technology founder, a founder again and again. So you got to be out there on the field talking to the customer, and you'll learn first of all whether the product you built is the right one or not. Because invariably you'll find out, the customer will tell you what it is. I mean, I'll give you a very simple analogy from one of my earlier companies. In the case of Banyan Systems, we were selling our product, and we were selling to a lot of companies, and they said, you know what, you're a computing product. We don't buy from anyone from other than IBM. You cannot sell. We tried talking to them and all that. They said no. And the early days of networking. But then, I was in Connecticut Mutual, one of the companies there, which is known for thinking ahead. And the guy looked at us and says, okay, so what do you do? So I said, listen, look at your PC. You got one LAN card there. You have another card going into your IBM controller, which talks to the mainframe. And then you everything use the mainframe. So what if I give you, first of all, take away one of your cards, give you a server, and still connect to the mainframe? He says, oh, so you're not a computer. You're actually a communication device. That I can buy from you because you're not IBM. Again, you would never have thought about it, but it was realized. And same thing when I did responses out there. We would try to tell about online marketing and all that. A major retailer says, I'll tell you what problem you're solving for me. I have people coming to my website. They say, I'm interested in your product. If I have a sales guy, it takes him 2.5 to 3 calls to sell that product. And the initial product is a $40 product. I have a lot of upsell, but the $40 product I can't afford to have a sales guy spend 2.5 times. If you can do the communication back in a series of communication steps back to the per prospect and get them closed, you solve it. So then he said, oh, so we are an auto marketing of steroids. So again, you have to listen to these customers. Now, I think in the third phase, you do need to bring in your sales meeting. You need to bring a marketing executive. And by the way, one caution I tell everyone, there's no such thing as a sales and marketing executive. Two very different beasts. Your sales executive is very different from your marketing executive, very different goals, very different charters. And in fact, you want tension between them. The sales guy has to complain about not having the leads, and the marketing guy has to complain about the sales guy not developing the leads. So I think it's very there. And then I think with the fourth, later on you can worry about CFOs. Initially I would say outsource all of them, outsource accounting, outsource everything else. One thing very important these days with SaaS businesses is getting customer success early. Now I'd actually put it in the second stage where hire as a customer success. Your best kind of customer success actually is an engineer who wants to get into sales. You know, say, hey, start meeting with customers, tell them what's working the product. So that's a good example of approach.
Well, it's fantastic, and I think you hit the nail on the head. Sometimes, you know, you think you have a product, you're selling something, and the customer sees it in a very different way.
Right.
And actually, that's a solution. And what you are selling is a product, and that's a solution. So it's a fabulous thing. Want to move to a slightly different track. It's a little more, you know, a personal kind of a question. What keeps you ticking? You just went on a trek, 15,000 feet in the Himalayas,
yeah.
Okay? And a follow-up to that is, if there are one piece of advice you want to give the founders, what would that be? These are my two questions for you.
Yeah. So, I was talking to VLK about my trek. I said literally, I did a Himalayan trek for 7 days. Went to Gangotri, from Gangotri to Tapovan, high altitude, 0 degrees, and I didn't plan for it. I actually thought it was going to be a walk in the park. As my friend said, you know, come for a trek in the Himalayas, but I did train for it. I did a lot of endurance training for it, and it sort of come back to one key property that I characteristically tell every entrepreneur is resilience. You know, you've got to have this total resilience. Like when I was doing the hike, there are times I say, you know, I got to give up. This is too hard for me. I'm not used to climbing boulders and everything else. But I stuck to it because I said, I got to get to the top. I can't tell people that I didn't get there. And that's true of any entrepreneur. The most important property that you have is you're going to get in a curveball. You're going to get trouble with customers causing problems. I mean, I'll give you one example in responses. We were doing online marketing. At this time, we were about 60 companies, a lot of major retailers and everything else. We were running the daily marketing program. Well, servers went down one day. We had Sun, we had EMC, we had NetApp. We had a bunch of these service providers whose products we were, Oracle, whose product we were using there. Server went down, their online marketing is stopped there. I immediately called the CMOs of all the companies and said, here's my personal number. I'm going to follow through with this. Second thing, I actually reached out to the CEOs of all these 4 companies. And every one of them actually replied back because I said, I'm dealing with these high visibility companies. I'm using your product. I'm delivering a service. And if that is not, I'm going to be finally on the hook on it. I need you to be backing me up. They created a separate development unit within 24 hours, provided a separate way to monitor this and supported us. This is an example where I tell every entrepreneur, you've got to be resilient. You've got to get up and say, because your reputation is on the line, you've got to give your customer access to your reputation and then and deal with it. So resilience, that's my one simple mantra to all entrepreneurs.
Fantastic. It's truly been a privilege. A round of applause. I've been inspired and I wish you the very best for continuing. And thank you for a great talk.
Thank you.